welcome everyone joining us, whether you're here live or joining later on through recorded sessions, to Sexient Beings. I'm Alix Pruett. I'm a certified sex, love, and relationship coach and reality guide. I work with men, women, and couples plus who want to move out of their old toxic patterns, traumas, and beliefs to create relationships from a place of deep connection, pleasure, and fulfillment, whether with themselves or others.
Great. I am RachelRose Pierce-Maiani, and I have a master's degree in psychology, and I work with women primarily who have gone through narcissistic or domestic abuse and want to overcome and heal from their trauma, reestablish a sense of self and love within their being to establish a future for themselves in a career or family dynamic that they choose.
Beautiful. It's fantastic, as always, to have you here, RachelRose. So our topic today, which I'm excited and slightly nervous about, admittedly, is being anti-sexist. So most people get exposed to the term sexism, right, or being
Yeah,
sexist.
right.
But in the connotation of anti-sexism, it's a person who's opposed to or intends to prevent sexism, right? It's based on the belief that whether male, female, or non binary, that there's no sexual orientation, identity, whatever it may be, that's greater than another, right? That's they have equal capabilities of intelligence, ability, and like value innately.
Yeah.
I don't know. We come across sexism a lot in our society. It's been a big topic for at least several decades, right? With all the women's rights movement, because there has been a lot of repression of women specifically. I feel like that's
21st century.
Yeah, and I feel like that's becoming more apparent with all the stuff coming out more recently around non-binary and other sexual identities.
Yeah, I agree. And a lot of that comes from ignorance and, people don't know that they're being ignorant and or reacting from a place of ignorance because they're confused or they feel not targeted, but contested in their beliefs. And, how dare you challenge my way of life?
Yeah, and it's kind of like that. It can feel like an assault on something you know as true, and like that doesn't mean that knowing is right or wrong. It just means that there was conditioning, there were things that were set up on a social basis of a way that the world had worked for a long time, but it isn't serving anymore.
No. And it is it's often contorted as well. I mean, I'm thinking about feminism specifically nowadays.
Yeah.
Like back, when my mom was younger and feminist movements like really began, like the 60s and whatnot. A little bit earlier than that, but like the big ones were, happening around then. And nowadays I see a lot of, would be or people who call themselves feminists being sexist as a feminist because of the confusion of what that definition truly is. Like you mentioned before that men and women are equal in their emotional intelligences.
Yeah.
And I definitely agree with that part. But in my personal opinion, I don't believe that I mean, speaking purely on biological sexes,
Hmm.
um, that feminism is not about equality, it's about equity.
Yeah.
It's about being treated fairly for what
Hmm.
that specific person or that sex's need is.
Yeah.
So I
Well,
I think that's
okay.
where, the lines get frayed for some people. And then, we've got all of these feminists out there who are being sexist towards men and basically preaching man hate. And
Hmm.
then that is perpetuating the sexism that quote unquote man would give toward the woman.
Yeah.
And then we have, non-binary people who kind of get left in the dust with that because we're too busy fighting over that dynamic to like educate ourselves and learn how to handle this new come about of different sexual orientations
Yeah.
and identities.
No,
And
I definitely agree.
yeah, and I think that one of the first things we need to do is re-educate people on what feminism really is, because it's making feminism, for lack of a better term, look bad to
Hmm.
the eyes of people who are predominantly sexist towards females.
Well, it's created a lot of that environment where
Hmm.
it's the more extreme opposite swing, right? Where
Hmm.
men are now the ones being put down, or like
Yeah.
male gendered people, right?
Hmm.
Um, and it's, to me, what I've noticed is it seems like there's that environment where it's like, oh, like men, right? It's this broad social category, have been
Hmm.
the oppressors for so long, like we need to put them in their place by the same treatment as they were giving everyone else. And like I think that's very subconscious and not like a very like conscious act most of the time, right?
Oh,
But
definitely.
in that, it just, once again, it perpetuates a negative cycle where we're not coming to places of understanding,
Hmm.
creating acceptance or education around how to actually create healthy relationships. It's kind of like where one, like thinking of little kids, like one little kid comes up and punches another little kid, right?
Hmm.
The other little kid may go off crying, right? Go talk to a parent, whatever it is. But there's a lot in that dynamic where the second little kid may just reach out and punch the other one. And
Oh,
it's the
definitely.
whole
Yeah.
concept of an eye for an eye, right? Then the
Yeah,
whole world goes
exactly.
blind. Um, but there's obviously the very overt ways that sexism shows up. And I think in this, what's valuable is talking to the more covert aspects, right?
Yeah.
Like I know through school, through even my professional corporate jobs, there's been a lot of talk around sexism, and especially sexism in the workplace. I've literally sat through seminars at my work where they've brought in specialists about
Hmm.
this. Once again, it's mainly aiming that at women and, um, to me, like pointing out how men are usually the perpetuators, which I am sorry to the
Yeah.
male population. That is how it has gone for a long time. There
Yeah.
is the influx of the more extreme feminist movements where the opposite is taking place as well. I'm
Exactly.
curious, do you have any examples that you can think of that you would say would fall more into that covert category
Of a
of
woman being
uh,
sexist in a workplace or a
either
man?
either way, right? And it doesn't have to be a workplace,
Okay.
right? Like, I mean, I have a few examples I can think of offhand. I also pulled up a list that I will probably post with this, um, and it kind of shows that like it's the iceberg, right? The top
Yeah.
things people think of, which is like, what is it? Murder, rape, and sexual violence, stalking, uh, physical and psychological violence, sexual harassment, insults, control, and that's all the top of the iceberg in
Mm-hmm.
this infographic. On the bottom of it, it's more of the covert levels, the things that people don't notice that compile over time to the top things happening, right?
Yeah.
And those tend to be threats, shaming, sexualization of women. It could be sexualization of men
Mm-hmm.
as well, excluding and making invisible, depreciation, rigid roles for men and women,
Yeah.
um, condoning violence against women or men, really, um, components on appearance or comments on appearance, and sexist language and jokes. And I'm sure I can think of at least a couple other more defined examples that like most people there. I've seen many people take actions on it without even realizing that they're kind of adding to that environment.
Yeah. The biggest one that's coming up for me, especially in a covert way,
Hmm.
is actually what is happening to women um, in the last 20 or so years. Definitely the millennial generation is a potentially a starting point of it. It could be before that. I don't want to pinpoint a time frame, but
Hmm.
um, women definitely, started with independence and feminism and trying to get, equality and pay and certain things
Hmm.
that can have that equality. Um, has, and I mean this in the best way possible, created the masculine independent woman, which isn't always a good thing. I think
Can I
it's
can I
important and
add
it's
a clarifier real quick?
sure.
Because we are very specifically talking about like male and female sex here, right? And
Yes.
those gender
Yes.
identities. But that reference of masculine and feminine not necessarily meaning male and
No,
female.
the energies, yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Masculine and feminine energies for sure. Yeah. But
yeah,
specifically with um biological females or
yeah,
anyone potentially who identifies as female. Um I won't categorize that too
yeah.
severely.
I just want to clarify, like if I or Rachel Rose
Definitely.
happen to say masculine or feminine, it's not pertaining to an identified sex specifically. It's more about the
Yeah.
qualities
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
the psychology that can be associated with those. It can also be compared to the light and the dark, yin and yang.
Yes, yes, exactly.
Right? Like
Exactly.
I want to add that to this space because
Confusion
there,
can happen. Mhm.
yeah, there's confusion that can happen there, along with um, there's a band of knowledge I know we have both explored that not necessarily everybody who's listening to this would have. Right?
Correct. Yes, thank you. I
So I'm
appreciate
sorry
that.
for
Not at
interrupting, but I thought
all.
that was important to delineate real quick.
Definitely is important, for sure. I don't wanna unintentionally piss anyone off.
Well, or create
But
more confusion about what is being
exactly,
said.
exactly. Um, what was I saying? Yeah, so I do think that, it's a covert reaction to all of
Mhm.
this happening over time. Like, it is now generational,
Yeah.
and it is coming from basically once women were entered into the workforce, like, this is a new thing that's going to happen and continue to happen if it's not addressed.
Mhm.
Um, where it's almost like armament that women or anyone who identifies as a woman has to wear to feel safe. It's like a
Mhm.
survival method,
Yeah.
but it is hindering and changing the whole world of like relationships
Mhm.
that exist, and it's like there are specific roles that both any sex has that fits for their strengths versus weaknesses. Like men and women, or not anybody, has different things that they are. Like women biologically bear the children,
Mhm.
men biologically take care of the home, they keep it safe, and women are put in a position where they have to embrace far more of their masculine energy
Mhm.
to survive nowadays, because it is viewed as an equality and not an equity,
Mhm.
and where the certain strengths lie. Like if you tried to have a man give birth, he'd probably die.
Mhm.
Not sure if I'm
Yeah,
making
that's
this
yeah,
super
by
clear.
yeah, well, by just that, like, biological sense, like, women
Hmm.
have that, like, their bodies are physically built to carry a life
Exactly.
within it and form that life.
Exactly. And so it doesn't make you anti-feminist to acknowledge that reality.
Yeah.
But I feel like that has been muddled. That we've got arguments over, like, women can play sports the same as men.
Mhm.
They can't.
Yeah.
And men can do, I'm trying to think of a good example, but nothing's coming to mind, the same as a woman, but they can't.
Mhm.
Only thing I can come up with is like, yeah, raising children or home bearing, you know,
Well,
having
and
children,
there's
but that's not a good example.
yeah, no, because you have there are stay-at-home dads and stuff like that, and
Exactly,
that's
exactly. Yeah,
they do amazing jobs in
exactly.
those aspects of child rearing. I mean, something I can think of that a man or like a male, right,
Hmm.
biologically cannot do is that aspect of carrying and giving birth to a child.
Yeah.
And like they can't breastfeed themselves. As far as I know,
Mm-mm.
like maybe there is
Some,
something that has
yeah,
happened that I am unaware of in the history of our world, but their bodies aren't set up necessarily to produce milk and supply that to a child.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. And, so through all of this, like you mentioned before, the yin and yang, like that there, like it's very, if you imagine that symbol, the yin and yang symbol, there's a little black in the white and a little white in the black.
Mhm.
It's not 50-50.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
so that balance looks off, or skewed, because like there's like so much white within that tiny little black. But that is the balance of both, of what
Mhm.
energies, like masculine energies and feminine energies, that we carry. And I think that the covert situation that's happening is, you know, within, from birth to, slowly aging, those who identify as women are forced to put in a little bit more masculine energy within themselves, because of all of the sexism that's happening out there.
Mhm.
And it's creating masculine women, which isn't healthy for women, or those
Yeah.
who identify as women. And it is creating, this whole uprooting of what healthy relationships can be,
Mhm.
because in truth, you know unconsciously, the woman wants a protector,
Mhm.
and it doesn't take away their independence to have or need one. You'll still be standing right behind that protector with a shotgun to protect them.
Yeah.
And I think that's my biggest thought on like covert, how covert is affecting over time through this anti-sexist behavior, socialization and changes that are happening in the last like 30 years.
Yeah. And I would say that I was, or like I have been one of those like
Hmm.
very masculine females, right?
Me too.
Without
Yeah.
having any conscious awareness of it. And in my experience with that, for me, that's what led to the burnout I hit really hard about a year and a half ago.
Hmm.
And in that, I was single full-time mom. I was working a 40-hour a week corporate job. Um,
Hmm.
I would come home and I had a house to completely manage on my own, not including 2 dogs, a half-acre property. I was trying to start my own business, plus taking a whole lot of courses to make sure I had all the tools and resources to be able to support clients, right? And, like, I was that protector, but I was creating this environment where I was the only person I could rely on as well,
Yeah.
right? So
Hmm.
literally, I was taking on so many tasks in that and so much responsibility in that. Like it was too much for what my system could do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And thus I hit a really hard crash and burnout and my body just went, "Nope, we're not doing this anymore." And I had to make myself take rest,
Yeah.
which is more when we're looking at like even like the very top like surface level of the ideas of masculine and feminine. The masculine energy tends to be the go go go, do do do, push push push,
Hmm.
right? And the feminine being those spaces of rest, reflection,
Hmm.
relaxation. And I wasn't giving myself those things because I had so much on my plate.
Yeah. I know exactly what you mean. I'd say it was about the same for me about a year and a half ago.
Mhm.
I would I would be in a panic at the end of the day if
Yeah.
I hadn't like if I couldn't list off at least 10 things that I'd accomplished in a day,
Mhm.
then it means I didn't do enough because
Yeah.
I was in a mental position of my marriage had just failed. I was left completely broke and I had to do it alone. I had to protect myself. No one was going to
Yeah.
protect me. So I had to figure out how I was going to protect me. And that means I have to be my own protector. And that means I have to take on two roles within my identity,
Mhm.
which skewed my sense of self.
Yeah.
And I noticed slowly, unconsciously for sure. And I started seeing it come out physically.
Mhm.
Um, I was dressing more aggressively,
Yeah.
and I wasn't taking care of my skin and uh, that like I was getting calluses and I was smelling different. It's very like I put on an energy of don't screw with me when I walk
Mhm.
down the street. Like I unconsciously tried to look as threatening as possible because I had to protect myself.
Yeah.
And that's not inviting energy.
Mhm.
Um, it protected me and it served its purpose, definitely. Uh, and now that time has passed and I'm still in that situation, I took the time for rest, like you said. And I started externally. I started taking baths and taking care of my skin and my body and doing things that made me feel feminine, skincare, self care.
Mhm.
And I started to buy brighter clothes.
Yeah.
I still prefer to wear black, but that's just personal. I bought some red shoes and was like, I feel like Dorothy.
I saw your red shoes, I'm pretty sure,
Yes.
and they are phenomenal.
They're I spent a good penny on them. They
Yes,
are
they're
my
beautiful.
favorites, and they make me feel, feminine and beautiful, but also still like I could kick some ass. So
Agreed,
I
that they give that impression. So I wanna bring it back around a little bit more. I
Mhm,
wanna talk about at least one of the
mhm,
ways I end up seeing that, like, men or male identifying bodies end up receiving types of sexism, right? And then there's some of the covert ways that I've seen that women actually help perpetuate this cycle
mhm, mhm.
of sexism towards them that I think is important as well. Um, but the first one on men is this aspect of it not being okay for them to be in their emotional side, right? That
Yeah,
is one of the bigger spaces I've seen that come up with, and that's part of my foundation in my coaching is working with men. And it's
mhm,
actually what had me feel called to work with men is that narrative that like men don't cry, right? It's not okay for men to be connected to their emotions, feeling their emotions.
mhm.
And that comes up with that men don't cry. It's don't be a pussy, which also discriminates against the feminine. Like it's this retraction that it's not okay for men to be in connection with their own feminine side in
Yeah,
their bodies,
yeah,
which creates this fragmented identity. And then when those things end up finally bubbling up to the surface, right? It's because there's been so much pressure built because they don't even know how to listen to those signals in their bodies. It becomes that volcanic explosion of expression,
yeah,
right? It becomes they're now punching someone in the face versus recognizing at the lower levels those first like bits of tingle and heat in their system. Hey, something's going on here.
mhm. Yeah,
Um, it becomes that like I mean, anger, I would say, is a more acceptable form of emotional expression for men.
yeah,
And so a lot of those spaces of shame and sadness and things like that end up then being expressed as anger because that's the outlet it has.
exactly, yeah. And that's I like that you said that because that literally the first thing that came to my mind was, and it's not in women, and when
Mhm.
it comes out in women, it the reaction it has is different.
Yes, very much so. They've
And
actually done studies around that, and I think it was talking about women in like the article I'd read on it was talking about women in political roles or like larger view roles where
mhm,
if they show aggression, right, or don't have a smile on their face
yeah,
consistently, right, like
mhm,
they then get like pushed into this bracket of like they're not friendly, they're not approachable. And like,
yeah,
I mean, they could just have a neutral face on. Like,
yeah, the resting bitch face.
yes, which I think most people probably have. It's just a
Just the
resting
relaxed
face.
face.
But in that also, resting bitch face, like the word bitch tends to be more associated with females over the years,
Yep,
right? I mean, by the
mhm,
actual like Webster dictionary definition of it, if I remember correctly, it's a female dog in heat.
yep, yep,
And so like even at the root of that word, it's associated with a female aspect in being a canine, right?
yeah,
But it's phrases like that, right? That keep helping perpetuate these cycles. And
yeah,
that's I think that's where those sort of things, they come in like they're presented as jokes
Yeah.
ultimately, but they're the thing in that infographic that is the bottom of the iceberg. It's that thing, those little bits that get normalized and normalized and normalized over time to tell us certain things are okay when they're really not.
Yeah.
And that leads to those bigger indiscretions.
Yeah. It's like, hey, this is making me uncomfortable, so I'm going to make a joke about it. It's like I always say about, sarcasm or faceticism.
Mhm.
And people have often got upset with me because I guess you could say I was offended by what they said, but what I really, well, probably was a little offended, I'll be honest here.
Mhm.
But I like addressed it and was just like, that wasn't funny. Like, don't say
Yeah.
that to me. And I've gotten in arguments over that because they're like, oh, it was a joke. I was just being sarcastic. And I was like, there's truth behind all of those. There's truth behind a joke.
Yeah.
There's truth behind faceticism. There's truth behind sarcasm. And if you're going to do that, at least own to that truth.
Yeah.
And then maybe I'll laugh with you
Well,
because
and
I can
that's
accept that truth too. If it depends on what it is. But
yeah.
people
Well, and
hide
that's
behind.
I think that's one of the things with jokes in particular, right?
Mhm.
Is if there wasn't even a little bit of truth behind the joke, right? It
Yeah.
wouldn't be funny. Like the
Yeah.
connection of the concept wouldn't make
Mhm.
sense. And I like am trying to think of like something that wouldn't make sense in that way, and my brain's just like confused. Like those things don't go together at all. What are you talking about? Right.
Yeah.
And but then like those those jokes and the thing that like makes it kind of funny is there's that piece of truth in there.
Mhm.
That's why you get comedians or people who are going into like self-deprecating humor,
Yeah.
right? Where it can be funny, right?
Because
There,
it can be relatable.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
for sure.
But
And
in that, yeah,
unfortunately,
that's
we live
the
in a
joking piece.
yeah. Fortunately, we live in a society where we find it funny to not only make fun of ourselves but also make fun of others.
Hmm.
And I think it's because there are a lot of realities within our societies that we don't like, and it's difficult for us to deal with. And the only way we've learned to deal with it is through humor. It's like
Yeah.
a lot of comedians, like you said, they self-deprecating, but also it's a high suicide rate in comedians,
Hmm.
and that you know joke culture is people hide things behind humor, hide pain, hide sadness
Yeah.
behind humor because it's more acceptable by society to be addressed as humorous versus serious or something that needs to be discussed in a serious light.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I guess I'm coming up with a conflict. I'm like, but when we can find like the humor in things, right? There's that playful nature to it.
Oh, sure.
But I think there is also there's a balance
Yeah,
there
there's
that
layers.
happens, right?
Everything's an onion.
Yeah. No, exactly. I think yeah, I mean, I had a situation recently where there was a friend and they had made a comment and it was reflecting on not to be a pussy, right? And
Mhm.
I made a joke back. And yes, there was a layer of defensiveness in my commenting back because I could have also not commented at all, right?
Sure.
I I did that in a way that I assumed was not attacking, just being like, why not be the pussy? Because there are all these strengths that
Mhm.
to me innately go on with redefining that word,
Yeah.
right? Whether it's physiological aspects or connecting to the emotions, which tends to be more in that feminine realm. And the person took a lot of offense. to me commenting back in a joking way. And I've found myself very confused
Mhm.
in that because I was like, they got offended because they thought I was demeaning them in this like reclamation of pussy power. um,
How dare you demean my demeaning statement joke?
yes, and I was just like, I was like, I didn't see an issue because I wasn't like shaming them for what they had said, right?
Mhm.
But in that, it, I can see how it possibly brought up shame as well, right?
Most
In
definitely.
feeling misunderstood because now I'm going on this thing. I'm like, no, this thing is actually super powerful. But it's interesting because it tests people's edges of that known world. It tests their identities
Mhm.
to
Well,
have
how
these conversations and spaces brought up.
especially when it is so profusely, accepted to
Hmm.
say it however that person said it,
Yeah.
and to be called out when, "No, the rest of the world says it this way too. It's fine."
Hmm. Yeah.
And I'm just like, how many times in history have we decided that just because it was acceptable for hundreds of years doesn't mean it should be anymore?
Yeah. No, that's just because something has worked doesn't mean it's going to continue to work. And I mean, that even goes for situations now and things
Mhm.
that are evolving in our current society. It's those things in another 100 years, there's going to be different tools or adaptations of old tools, and those things are going to go in cycles, and it's this constant trying to find balance
Mhm.
in that system.
And I think it's gonna be very difficult moving forward in time because of how fast changing and the evolution of the technological age
Mhm.
is literally just speeding things up. Like, it took, 100 years to go from a bicycle to a car,
Yeah.
or more. I'm not gonna say I know my numbers well. Um, but now we're going from, in the span of my existence, we went
Mhm.
from, you know, home phones to dial up internet to now it's all in my pocket and everything is at
Yeah.
my hand. And it's only going to get faster and faster and faster
Mhm.
at a faster and faster pace.
Yeah.
And so that in and of itself creates a fear in, I guess, me, but like, of people aren't going to be able to emotionally keep up with the changes either.
Yeah. No, and change is one of those things that
People don't
tends
handle
to,
well. Yeah.
well, we haven't been passed down or modeled or taught the tools, right,
Hmm.
to be in connection with our bodies and emotions anymore.
Hmm.
But in that, when there's change,
Hmm.
that's usually what stimulates people's emotions,
Yeah.
right? That's whether it's something we consider a positive or a negative emotion, something we want to feel or something we don't want to feel.
Yes.
It's it's those little points of change that cause there to be this energy in motion, the emotion.
Yes. I love the way you put that.
I like energy in motion. I think it's a good way to phrase that.
Yes, I'm going to steal it.
Ah, have at it. I stole it from several other people I've heard talk over the years. So,
That's great, and I
uh,
completely agree.
yeah,
It's, I think people forget that there is a balance to what is happening around us environmentally and what is happening
mhm,
within us internally, and that there needs to stay, like, it's harder for us emotionally to keep up
Yeah.
environmentally. Like that, like we need time to process and orient ourselves and grieve and be angry or be sad or be happy. We need time for that.
Hmm.
And environmentally, we don't always get that.
No, not at all.
So there's a
I mean, that's not including any of the small changes that can be the
mhm.
big life changing
Oh, exactly.
pieces. I mean, when somebody passes away or there's a divorce or a
Yeah.
breakup, like those are spaces that bring up a lot of grief in a person's system. And I mean, I know it took me a lot of healing time
Hmm.
after my divorce. And I mean, there's still things that come up, but those are more residual. But of just noticing what pain was even there around that loss,
Hmm.
right? It wasn't a healthy relationship by any means, but in that there was still a loss
Oh,
of
most
that point in
definitely.
time, of that connection, of the identities I had
Hmm.
in that relationship.
Yeah.
And I remember like feeling like I felt shame around that because I was like, I should be ready to go back to work like
Hmm.
a couple days after big points of chaos in
Yeah.
that relationship. And I wasn't. My system was in collapse. All I could do was lay in bed and sob because there
Hmm.
was so much coming up.
Yeah.
And thankfully I had an amazing boss who was super supportive, and my mom at that time was able to come and help out with my very young son at that point in caring for him. But I know
Hmm.
there's been so many other times I've gone through breakups, and it was just that like suck it up mentality. And then I repressed all my emotions, and
Yeah.
they
Definitely.
built into deeper layers of things.
And that's the armor.
Hmm.
That's shedding the armor is the hardest part. Either it doesn't matter who it is, boy,
Yeah.
girl, non-binary. Shedding the armor is the hardest part.
Hmm.
Is letting go of the things that have been protecting you so that you can find balance again and that sense of self that brings you peace.
Yeah.
Is my biggest issue with my divorce was the pain or shame about the loss of my home and this
Hmm.
fantasized future that I had for myself.
Yeah.
Like in my brain at that time, we were trying for kids. Now I'm never going to have any
Hmm.
because I'm divorced now.
Yeah.
And my home was completely taken from me. So I have to figure out where I'm supposed to exist in, where I'm supposed to
Hmm.
just be and feel safe there. And I think people highly underestimate the value of that sense of home feeling, that
Yeah.
safety there. And I think a lot less people actually have ever achieved that than we would like to admit. And that creates a lot of floating and aggression feelings
Yeah.
that can come out in a very sexist or aggressive way towards the person, the gender that created that rift for you.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you've looked much into the idea of like the mother wound or the father wound
Yeah. Yeah.
and things like that, right?
Hmm.
But when I've done my own work in those spaces, um, but also in researching it, what I keep coming across is it comes back to this core of shame.
Yeah.
And that can be like that mother wound tends to be more associated with males. It is something women have as well, right?
Yeah.
That may present different ways, but when I personally worked with it, it was more around the male aspect, and it was this self-blame, shame,
Yeah.
and guilt held in the system at the abandonment of the mother. And that can be physical, like the person's physical mother. It could also be um, the idea of like female partners
Hmm.
leaving, right? Uh, those people who filled that more feminine role in a person's life leaving or abandoning them, but the shame they hold in their own body
Yeah, and that can also
around it.
come from a man, like the mother
Yes.
wound. I think people don't realize that a man can still create a mother wound because
Yes.
the yin and yang situation.
Hmm.
The abandonment that, a person who identifies as male creates comes from that feminine side within a man. It's the caring, protective side, which
Hmm.
is a feminine energy with
Yep.
masculine protection. It is still capable of creating a mother wound, so you can still, so that I think that is probably where it's seen a lot in women who get
Hmm.
the mother wound versus men.
Yeah.
And the same can happen vice versa.
Yeah.
So women can totally create a father wound.
Yes. Yes.
And I can't tell you which one I personally would say is more prominent.
So and there was what was the other thing? Oh, talking on sorry, I wanna kind of bring it back around.
No problem.
Those covert ways that
Hmm.
women, especially like in sexism towards women, can end up excuse me, um, validating this narrative that it's okay, right?
Hmm.
And to me, that comes up in like when there are these smaller slights, these acts of covert sexism,
Yep.
right? It just gets pushed off, like, and that can be like, let's say you and I were in a space, a man came up and like made a comment about your body or a
Hmm.
joke towards you that was
Hmm.
sexist for you, and I like you were telling me about this and how it impacted you, and I just go, oh, you're fine, like it's no big deal, right? Like
Hmm.
that happens all the time. There's also where I've in like going to lifestyle clubs and being around this very like sexually powered space,
Hmm.
I've gotten to witness where women actually dismiss their own experience, right? Because they
Oh,
have very
sure.
strict rules. They're around you need to ask for permission. Like if you want to touch anybody, even in most engagements, like if you want to have a conversation, like if you ask.
Yeah.
And if the person says no, they only have to say no once. And
Yeah.
in that, no is a complete sentence. So you don't need an explanation of why it's a no for them. You move on, right?
Yeah.
But I've watched where there was this woman sitting there and a male was approaching her and being like, oh, do you want to get in the hot tub with me? Right. And she's like, I'm okay. Like it was this very elusive no. Like she wasn't one actually saying no.
Yeah.
Or there's also the like maybe later. It was it was all the like I'm not interested signs without actually saying no.
Yes, because of
And
the fear of retaliation to that no that has happened enough
yes.
times over time.
Yeah.
It's like
And
you were saying about the small things.
mhm.
Is what happens is we don't notice that that small thing was taken away, and so we don't
Yeah.
know that we need to refill that little
Yes.
small thing. And so over time, it gets just little small thing after another, and we don't notice it, and then all of a sudden we're empty.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, no, and that
what are
is a
we supposed to
huge
do?
piece
I've
of it.
never learned how to refill.
Mhm. Yeah, no, and that there's huge parts in my teachings, which is helping people reconnect with their authentic yes and no versus the socially conditioned, the noticing, are you just saying yes because like you don't want to, like, that conflict, the idea of that conflict
Mm-hmm.
is too unsafe, right? For the retaliation you've
Yeah,
received in the past for your no.
exactly.
Um, but in that, the thing I found interesting was it was actually one of the employees in this space who looked at the person and was like, "Hey, like I'm pretty sure I heard a no there. Like you need to back off." Right? And then the woman who was sitting there who'd been giving this like inadvertent no to the guy continuing to ask the same question, she was like, "Oh, it's not that big of a deal, blah blah blah." And I was like, you're being given your no.
Yeah.
And so like in that, it's there's a piece in women and men of like coming back to the ownership of their no and what
Mm-hmm.
is actually okay for them, like
Mm-hmm.
what they want to be receiving versus what they feel they have to receive.
Yeah. And like you said, the underlying shame
Hmm.
and the like acceptance of that, like that just made me think. Have you ever seen the TV show Sex Education?
Yes, I love
There's
that show.
the scene where this girl gets on a bus, and high school girl, pretty girl,
Hmm.
gets on a bus, and this guy just starts jerking off onto her and like
Yes.
comes on her pants. And when she immediately gets off the bus. She's terrified. She's traumatized.
Hmm.
But it hasn't registered for her yet. She's still kind of in shock. And the first thing that happens is she talks to her friend, and she says it like it was no big deal, nonchalant.
Yeah.
She's like, "Oh, it's fine. I just, my pants are ruined." It's like, guys, come on me." And
Hmm.
then throughout the rest of the series, it is showing how that's quote unquote small sexual harassment.
Yes.
And I say that very lightly.
Yeah.
Because like, didn't technically touch her, he just came on her. But she's she can't even have her boyfriend touch her anymore. She
Hmm.
can't ride the bus. Like there's a lot of can'ts that come with that.
Yeah.
And she's too scared to even smile to other people.
Yeah.
And she says in when she finally opens up to her friends, is that it's not that she's worried that that guy is going to be on the bus. It's that he looked so kind and innocent, so it could be anyone, and
Yeah.
now I'm scared of everyone.
Yeah. No, and that is a big piece where there are those violations, and like even the way the human brain and emotional system works, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Especially when it comes to more of that primal system and the fight, flight, freeze and fawn responses. It can be one small instance, it can be one big instance, right?
Yep.
It can be a whole lot of small instances built up over time that tell us this isn't safe, right? And
Exactly.
I think that's where, I mean, even with the feminism acts, because of the aggressions towards women, the ownership towards women, all these things that did exist in our society and have existed in our society, like men have become something that is so unsafe. Like we still crave those relationships though,
Yeah.
right? Like there's,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure there's other
And
biological and evolutionary things in there as well.
yeah, and I think it
But
has a lot to do with the lack of balance
mhm,
within the feminine and masculine energies in both sexes.
yeah,
The masculine energy that's coming out of women because we don't feel safe is hurting, is wounding the feminine energy in a man that can actually create that safety.
yeah,
And so it doesn't come out anymore. Instead, what is our first gut reaction when we're offended or hurt by someone? Is we
mhm,
retaliate.
yeah, yeah.
And
It's
so
well,
it's just a back and forth of retaliation.
well, and the interesting thing is, So when you like the courses I've gone through on working with the nervous system, right?
Mm-hmm.
And more specifically through breath work courses, they've brought up information, and it talks about those different um, stress responses. So fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And fawn is
Mm-hmm.
a newer one, but it's the ways that we will try to ease and appease
Yeah.
another person,
Mm-hmm.
and that's more of the level we're touching on right now.
Yeah.
In like you're giving somebody a yes, even though it's really not for you.
Yeah.
Um,
I'm going to attempt to say this as kindly as possible while slightly beating around the bush so that I don't get attacked from my boundaries.
well, and sometimes it's like there's it's a complete no in your system, right? And you're
And
not listening to that, and you say yes just to avoid the potential conflict altogether,
exactly. Mm-hmm.
right? And it's not even necessarily beating around the bush. I mean, like that woman very easily could have been like giving like body language that said no, but her mouth said yes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or vice versa. And like to me, that's where there's those misalignments, and especially in female bodies,
Mm-hmm.
because of how long we've had to give up our no.
Yeah.
Um, oh, I lost what I was going to say before. That's
Oh
all
no.
right.
Let me know if it comes back.
I am sure it may, and maybe it's just not right for the time right now.
Perhaps
Um,
not.
but yeah, there's so many of those spaces, and I guess like to me, the point of picking this like anti-sexist topic this week is
Mm-hmm.
to help bring that awareness.
Yeah. It's emotional intelligence and balance
Hmm.
that we're trying to bring to awareness.
Yeah. I'm curious, do you have anything else standing out for you of ways that sexism shows up? And it may be in more covert ways, right? Just because those can be harder to see. It doesn't matter if it's sexism, racism, narcissism, right? Like all those spaces
And
have covert aspects as well. I just
they
want to
have,
give people ways they can
yeah.
identify, and like it's to
I
me
mean,
it's that
it
validity that like this thing isn't, there's a piece of you saying this isn't okay in your system, right?
yeah.
And
I mean,
you can
what's
listen
coming
to
up for
that.
me is the glorification of
Mhm.
things that men can do versus the shaming of things that women can do, like
Yes.
traveling, education, careers. Um, the only thing I can really, that comes quick to mind that women can do that men get shamed for is
Hmm.
like being a single parent.
Yeah.
Like I can't come up with all that many
Yeah.
other than things that like everyone just gets shamed for that. Like,
Hmm.
um,
Well,
but
and I would say being with emotions is another
yeah,
big one,
definitely,
right?
definitely.
For
But
where
women
men
get
receive
shamed for
no
that as
shame.
well.
Yeah, women I noticed have a little bit more of
A little
a
more leeway.
scapegoat. It doesn't come without shame, but it's like, oh, women are emotional, right? And even
Yes.
though it gets brought about in a shaming way, it does give women a little bit more leeway, where men get the like men don't cry. Like that's that complete like hard line of like men are not allowed to do this. Oh, like
Mhm.
women, why are you doing this? This is annoying. But
Right. Yes, I
you
agree.
have an excuse. Like you have these
Yes.
female hormones.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Well, I hate to cut it short, but I do have to get going for a client meeting.
Okay, perfect. Thank you again for joining me today. And we will be back next week, Thursday at 1 p.m. PST.
I'll see you guys there.
All right. Bye.
Bye.